All right, we are here on today's Chopping It Up with Green Cabbage. For those of you who've joined us the past couple weeks, welcome back. But for those of you who are new, these are our 15-minute chop sessions where we talk all things procurement, strategy, negotiation, you name it. I'm Natalie Plastro. I'm head of marketing at Green Cabbage. And today I'm joined by the one and only Eric Cunningham, CEO and founder of Green Cabbage.
Thank you, Natalie. This is a session that a lot of our audience has been requesting on VARs today. Very relevant to the indirect technology space. So Thanks for having me again. Let's chop it up.
Of course.
Let's go chop it up.
Chopping it up. So Eric already kind of mentioned it, but today we're focusing on VARs or value-added resellers within indirect technology. So let's just set the stage for the group, Eric. Talk a little bit about what a VAR is and what the benefit of using a VAR is.
Yeah, so VARs, acronym value-added reseller is what the VARs are. A lot of you folks already know this, so we'll get into the deeper conversation here in a minute. But, you know, VAR's been around for a long time, primarily, initially, I guess, to really help the OEMs collect their money quicker. And it was more of a finance piece of paper working directly with the end client. And then it evolved into some strategic things we'll talk about today, services, implementation, engineering, and really augmenting and helping the OEM get wider and deeper in accounts as well too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, a lot of value from a VAR. We've seen just in our customer base alone, the spend increase is about 5 to 10% year over year. So most of our customers, if you look at their entire indirect tech spend, about anywhere from 38 to 45% goes through a VAR today.
Right. I think we talk a lot about building a proactive procurement ecosystem, and VARs are definitely a crucial part within that. Something we see a lot within our clients, really utilizing them for that one-stop shop, having the specialized expertise, all of those amazing reasons to utilize VARs. So can we talk a little bit about the differences in VARs? So what is what we call or reference internally a mega VAR versus a strategic VAR? And what are the different use cases that those can be applied to?
Yeah, so I think everybody knows mega VARs, the CDWs, the SHIs, the insights, and we could go on and on. And then there's a layer down, which is really the VARs that focus on a subset of offerings. Maybe it's networking or it's data center, but not to the level of an insight or a CDW or an SHI where they're offering thousands of products and services in the market. And then you get into that strategic VAR. So we have these relationships with all of the above, but I think what's important is your business has certain use cases that you need to feel comfortable with, whether it's a local VAR that's going to be there for you when you make that phone call, or it could be specific to a technology like security, right, which is a big one. So security, no one's taking that lightly, especially cybersecurity. So there's VARs out there that just really focus on reselling that technology, that OEM, but also providing those services, business process management, et cetera, on top of that.
Yeah.
So that's hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, and to that point, do we see kind of a mix of having that mega VAR and maybe some strategic, or maybe just one or the other, really dependent on the situation?
Yeah, so some of our clients before we got involved had, I'll call it 10 different relationships with VARs. When we would look at the relationship, we would ask them, who's strategic to you? Why are you working with this VAR? I'm just buying this through them. And there's a lot of consolidation out there in the market. Yeah. So cost plus is a common term where you provide that VAR much more volume, and therefore you're receiving a better deal. So yes, we see that a lot out there, but having that that mix of having a strategic mega VAR the mega VAR and then the strategic VAR. Yes, it's very common.
Right. Now, switching gears a little bit, just to briefly talk about benchmarking VARs. So there are a lot of different ways you can benchmark your configurations or the specific products or services that your organization is going out into the market and buying. But one thing that we found really important is making the differentiation when you're benchmarking the VAR. So each one of our data points is either tagged with, it is tagged with the OEM, but also if the VAR, if it's applicable. That's a huge step in being able to create that relevant pricing. And then use that in negotiations with VARs. So I think maybe we switch gears and talk a little bit about that, talk a little bit about how VARs get paid, shine some light on those areas.
Yeah, so there's several different certification check marks you need to have through an OEM. And the more certifications you have, whether it's the number of people that are certified or engineers or the level of expertise you have, your transfer cost from the OEM to the VAR is going to be much more appealing, right? So as a client and as like Green Cabbage, our job is to really unpack that. So if they're, not to get into details here, and we're happy to do this offline, but if there's a tier one, if you're a tier one provider, which is at the top within that specific OEM, your transfer cost is going to yield you another 6 to 8 basis points or points on the deal. So knowing that and then benchmarking that particular deal, you already know out of the gate. So how do VARs get paid? They get paid on the front end, right? So transfer costs plus their markup margin. And then there's also these back end rebates, and that's based on the volume of the OEM that they sell as well too.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, most of these VARs today are transforming themselves into not only just product companies, but services companies, which is very appealing to the client because, again, it's less complexity, less suppliers or vendors that they have to work with, as long as they're comfortable with that particular organization as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So common thing we hear about, again, with how VARs get paid and how that process works. Can you talk a little bit about deal registration?
Deal registration, yeah, it's getting tighter. So back in the day, so just a little context for our audience. I worked in the VAR space. Was fortunate to work for a phenomenal company based in Michigan, Grand Rapids, Michigan, a family-owned business that later sold it to Presidio. And then we've got several other people here in the company. You know, one of the partners had a reselling business that sold as well too. So going way back in the day, the first thing you would want to do as a VAR is get involved and talk to people in the business to see what they're buying, right? So when you find out what they're buying, you log into the suppliers portal. I'll be Cisco, Palo Alto, Dell, whatever the case is, and then you would register a deal. You would say, this customer's buying this. I had a meeting with these people. This is what they're going to buy this year. When you get deal registration, it's basically you get a head start on pricing, right? So it's price protected. It's your deal, assuming that the OEM approves it, which, as I mentioned, things are getting tighter, and there's a lot more questions you have to ask for. Specifically, the client's consent, so to speak. But deal registration does give you a head start as a VAR. So our clients need to be careful with conversations that they have, and they really have to control the narrative of what VAR they want to work with.
Right.
In many cases, what we're doing is we're bringing in different VARs. Anyone can sell the product, right? Some get better discounts. Obviously, deal registration is one of those things, but it's important to find out who's going to implement, whether it's the hardware or the software as well too. So that's really what deal registration is.
Yeah.
It's a mousetrap that you got to be careful with.
I know we love talking about mouse traps. I think supplier strategy is so important. And then VAR strategy on top of that. We just talked about supplier strategy the other week, but these are all things that need to be taken into consideration. when formulating a cohesive ecosystem. All right, next topic. Let's talk about incumbency. Tell the audience a little bit about what that is. And
Incumbency. Okay,
yeah.
so you're the VAR that sold the initial deal, right? So now the renewal is coming up, or there's an add-on product or service or software that the client's going to buy. So that's what they refer to as incumbency. So you have protection to get that. You also have protection for the renewal.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I know your next questions will be, how do you get away from a VAR? We'll talk about that here in a minute. But essentially, you have that price protection that also helps you with the upfront payment with margin, and then the back end payment with the rebates as well too, assuming they have a rebate program.
Yeah. I mean, these are all very valuable things to keep in consideration. It's really the whole premise of this is having their mindset, knowing what the VARs are looking for, knowing what your suppliers are looking for. And what that does is really allows for a more sustainable relationship, one that's mutually beneficial.
Yeah,
but
to that point, I mean, we deal with thousands of clients, and they're one of the biggest initiatives they have is less suppliers. So having a powerful relationship that you can, number one, you got to like them, you got to trust them, and you got to see the continuous value.
Right.
You have that in place with the right VAR, then you're not going to have to worry about it, and they're not going to have to worry about it either, because the volume of spend, as a sales rep, if you're a VAR, you get paid on margin. You don't get paid on the total deal sale. You get paid on the margin that you guys create, that VAR creates for that specific OEM, and then of course the leadership team, they get to get their hands in all the back end rebates, which is great for them too.
Yeah.
So it's really established in that trusted relationship at an executive level at the VAR.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you already brought it up before I could, but what do you do, or what do the clients do in the case of moving away from a VAR?
Yes. So if you look at the paperwork that you have to inform, number one, the VAR, and inform, number two, the supplier that you are considering alternatives, and you do not want that specific VAR to have deal registration, or what we just talked about is incumbency. That has to be put in writing based on the agreement X amount of days in advance, typically 90 days in advance. At Green Cabbage here, we're doing a lot of evals for our customers to figure out, the last 5 years of, I've had 5, 6, 7 VARs. What has that relationship been like? What's the estimated margins? Based on our analysis and our thesis that we're creating, who would be the best fit moving forward? What does that agreement look like? What does the financials and the terms look like on that as well too? And then just kind of having an alternative solutions as well too.
Mm-hmm.
Truth be told, a lot of our clients, they find their supplier diversity checks that they're trying to spend, push more other business through diversification organizations, and they feel like the VARs are that's a great avenue in order to make sure that they're meeting those marks as well too. But again, it goes back to having that strategic VAR as well too, and having the balance of who is my go-to mega VAR or two mega VARs that I have, depending on the size of the organization. Where do I need my equipment shipped to? Am I just based here in the States? Do I have an international presence? Do I have a Canadian presence, South America? Who's going to be able to fulfill that? Because, a few months ago, and we're still dealing with it, there's still a massive supply chain shortage of how customers are getting their gear, or their, anything that's a hardware platform shipped to them as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the thing that sticks out to me is that these all are pretty strategic initiatives, right? It takes a lot of knowing you're knowing intensely your relationships with your suppliers, knowing your strategy, knowing how you're going to treat every relationship different, which often becomes difficult when you experience the limited time, limited resources for people to work on this, because constantly just trying to put out the little fires that are in front of us. But having expertise and giving out these little bits and pieces of information to make this process easier, I think is just so valuable. And it's something we really look to share with our audience, which is why we have these job sessions, right?
That's right.
Absolutely.
All
right.
Remarks, Natalie, what I would say is, if you think you're getting a great deal, probably are not getting a great deal, right?
Of course.
So there's a lot of opportunity in the resale channel, right? But having the relationship at executive level with resellers and having one with the OEM, a lot of companies don't really negotiate with the resellers. They'll negotiate at the OEM level,
Right.
depending on that, the relationship level. But yeah, we're here to help you. If you want us to take a look at your VAR spend, come back with a thesis and make some recommendations, hit us up at green-cabbage.com and we can chop it up.
Always chopping it up. Well, thank you everyone for joining today's Chopping It Up with Green Cabbage. Any questions, go to our website. We'll be able to help you there. We look forward to the next one.
Chop it up.
Thanks, everyone.